When China appears in the headlines, the analysis often follows a familiar pattern. Commentators compare it to a past superpower. Predictions are made, and a few years later, many of those predictions turn out to be wrong. So why does this keep happening? Is China really that mysterious? Or are we using the wrong tools to understand it? In today's video, we're going to look at why so many forecasts about China fail, and why understanding China may require stepping outside the usual Western political models. One common habit in international politics is comparison. When a new power rises, analysts often look for a historical parallel. Is it another Soviet Union, another United States, another empire? In the late 1970s, when China began opening its economy under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, many in the West compared it to the Soviet Union. The expectation was simple: introduce markets, allow private business, and eventually the political system will collapse. That's what happened in Eastern Europe. But that's not what happened in China. Markets expanded, private companies grew, trade boomed, yet the state and the Chinese Communist Party that became stronger, not weaker. The comparison did not hold. A similar pattern appeared with the Belt and Road Initiative. Some analysts compared it to the Marshall Plan, the American program that rebuilt Europe after World War II, but the Marshall Plan operated in a divided Cold War world. It was openly ideological. It aimed to strengthen liberal democracy and contain communism. China's Belt and Road Initiative works differently. It focuses on infrastructure and trade links. It does not usually come with a political message about how countries should govern themselves. Again, the comparison only goes so far. Part of the confusion comes from how we define the modern state. In Europe, the modern nation-state developed after centuries of religious wars and treaties in the 17th century. Political systems changed through revolutions, like the French Revolution, which broke sharply with the past. China's political story is different. For thousands of years, China has seen itself as a continuous civilization state. Dynasties rose and fell, including the Qing dynasty, but the idea of China as a unified political and cultural entity remained. When the empire collapsed in the early 20th century, it was replaced by a republic. Later, in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party established the People's Republic. But internally, this was often framed not as the creation of a completely new state, but as the restoration of order after chaos. In this context, unity and stability carry deep historical meaning. This helps explain why Taiwan is viewed in Beijing not simply as a foreign policy issue, but as a question of historical continuity and territorial unity. Another difference lies in how change is understood. In many Western narratives, history moves through dramatic breaks, revolutions, regime change, sudden transformations. In China, change is often presented as gradual adjustment. The shift from the policies of Mao Zedong to those of Deng Xiaoping did not dismantle the system. Instead, it reformed it. The structure remained, the policies adapted. This pattern of slow, cumulative change makes predictions of sudden collapse less likely to come true. Then, there is the question of political legitimacy, or, in simple terms, why people accept a government's authority. In many Western countries, legitimacy is closely tied to elections. Leaders gain authority by winning votes in competitive contests. In China, legitimacy is more closely linked to performance. If the system delivers economic growth, reduces poverty, maintains order, and improves living standards, it strengthens its claim to rule. This idea has deep roots in Chinese political thought, including the influence of Confucius, where good governance was judged by competence and stability. Public protests in China often focus on local issues, housing prices, corruption, services, rather than calls to change the entire political system. This does not mean political debate is absent, but much of it takes place within the party structure, rather than through open multi-party competition. There is also a different balance between the individual and the collective. In many Western political traditions, the individual is the starting point. Rights and freedoms are framed around personal choice. In China, social stability and collective order are often given priority. When policies are debated, the main question is frequently practical. Does this protect stability? Does it maintain growth? Does it prevent disorder? Mistakes are often framed as administrative problems to fix, rather than as moral or ideological crises. Time horizons also matter. In electoral democracies, leaders often think in 4 or 5 year cycles. Policies are shaped by the next election. China's planning culture tends to look further ahead, 10, 20, even 30 years. Industrial policy, technological development, and infrastructure expansion are often designed with long timelines in mind. Rather than dramatic confrontation, China often seeks to quietly change the structure of global supply chains or reduce its dependence on foreign technology over time. This long-term approach can look slow, but it can also be persistent. Economically, China does not treat the free market as an end in itself. Markets are seen as tools. Private companies operate widely. Innovation is encouraged. But in strategic sectors, state-owned firms remain important. During the 2008 global financial crisis, Beijing responded with a massive stimulus program, directing state banks and companies to invest heavily in infrastructure. The goal was not to defend an abstract idea of the free market, but to protect stability and growth. Innovation is welcomed, as long as it does not threaten overall control. On the global stage, China rarely presents its model as a universal message. Unlike the ideological competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, Beijing does not usually promote its political system as something others must adopt. Its foreign engagements are often transactional, focused on trade, investment, and access to resources. That does not mean there are no strategic interests, but the language is usually about mutual development, not political transformation. When it comes to power, Western political culture often associates strength with visibility, military alliances, public warnings, loud rhetoric. China often prefers a quieter style. Technological achievements are sometimes revealed only after they are operational. Diplomatic responses can be restrained. The emphasis is on shaping facts on the ground rather than dramatic statements. This can create an impression of ambiguity. But ambiguity is not the same as confusion. So why do predictions about China so often miss the mark? A common assumption in Western political theory is that economic growth leads to social change, which leads to political liberalization, which eventually leads to a different political system. In some countries, that sequence has happened. In China, it has not, at least not in the way many expected. The middle class has expanded. Living standards have risen, but rather than pushing for systemic confrontation, many people link their prosperity to stability. When challenges appear, economic slowdowns, property market risks, demographic decline, the system tends to absorb shocks, redistribute costs, and adjust policy rather than fracture immediately. This does not mean change is impossible. It means the path may not follow familiar models. China is not simply a new Soviet Union. It is not a delayed version of Western capitalism. It is not a traditional military empire seeking ideological conversion. It is a political system shaped by its own history, institutions, and internal logic. And perhaps the real challenge is this: if we keep measuring China using tools designed for other countries, will we continue to misunderstand it? Or is it time to rethink the framework itself? Let me know what you think in the comments below.